Okay, everything is rolling?
Is this one recording?
Yep, the red light's on. Okay, let's say a word of prayer. Lord Jesus, we're thankful for this day and opportunity to do your service. Lord, you said you should know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And that's what we're interested in accomplishing here today, in Jesus' name. All right, now one more little technical thing, and it's weird, but it goes like this. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Kay, now I'll tell you. What I just did is simply to synchronize the cameras. It's not anything magical.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean, oh my God, the countdown is here. What we're going to do, we're just going to record a bunch of stuff here, and we can do some more tomorrow. If we forget something today, it doesn't matter. We can put it in. If you think of something in 20 minutes that should have been said right up front, it doesn't matter.
Great.
We are simply wanting to reduce this down to tape so that it doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And the big job lays ahead. That's the editing. Okay? So I want you to completely relax. There is nothing that can't be done, redone. If we sneeze, if we cough, if, anything can
That's
be fixed.
reassuring.
If the ceiling caves in, all we do is clean up the mess and keep going.
Okay.
So everything here is real laid back. You got a lot of information, and we want to get this down into a storyline, because I think what you've got here is something that is extremely important for people to know about.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about you, and see now where'd you start out your life? You were born and raised in the country,
Yeah,
the city?
I was raised on a farm. In fact, I live in the same neighborhood in which I grew up. It was my grandfather's farm. Part of it was divided into thirds. But in 1939, my grandfather was an obstetrician in Norfolk. He was also in the Naval Reserves. He was in charge of military intelligence in Norfolk, which is the largest military naval complex in the world. So I was born in the Naval Hospital, which was the NATO headquarters, and brought home to my grandparents' farm. My father was in the South China Seas on a naval vessel. My uncle was in the Navy. So I come from a long line of military civilian folks. They were not full time military individuals. They had jobs, and they would go into the war. They would be in reserves, and as my grandfather was, he stayed in and retired a Navy captain. But I live in a house that was in part of my grandfather's field. And
is that right?
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
But I'm being strangled financially by this Army intelligence group, JAG group, that my husband.
Now, JAG, is that JAG?
JAG, Judge Advocate General. I think American citizens do not realize how many JAGs are in our court system, and they take orders. They are in the chain of command, they're active reserve, and they are in our court system everywhere you look.
Not just federal, state and local?
Everywhere, yeah. And they're going to meetings once a month, and if there is a case like many of the military intelligence wives like myself, and we have information that would come out in a divorce hearing or whatever, they totally control it. It is Judge John Moore, in my case, in Virginia Beach, is an Army Ranger. He is active reserve. He's a VMI Army colonel. He's a graduate of VMI. In Virginia Beach, in the courts, there are at least 6 judges, and I'm including commissioners in that, because in Virginia we have a system where the commissioners do a lot of the decisions, And all of these in Virginia Beach who take care of military wives are military judges.
No, you mentioned the term VMI. What is that?
Well, VMI is Virginia Military Institute, and it's where General Marshall, the Marshall Plan, went to school. It's a little West Point. There's a lot of tradition there, but it's based on the Greek sort of Spartan military concept. And my father went to Washington and Lee, which is also in Lexington. And I know that there is some sort of, I won't say cult, but there probably is some sort of
club?
Secret society.
Okay.
And so it's very, very tight clique. But what I was trying to say is that the judges are military men, and they're not independent. They take orders.
They take orders.
There's a chain of command, and in my particular case and the other 11 military wives whom I have met so far, there are many, many more, but they've all been handled the same way. Mm-hmm. That's not a normal divorce at all.
Yeah, I've heard of these kind of situations before, but it's never been put so concisely and so reasonably that there would be a connection why some people just, no matter what attorney you have, it doesn't matter.
Oh, no.
The divorces and the settlements of assets never go the right way.
No, and there's a FISA court, which I know is involved in my case.
What kind of court?
Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It's a Justice Department secret court that American citizens are not aware of. There have been a couple of articles on it. It's a small group of men, and I think there's a woman on it. I believe there's 7 justices. And in reality, the article that I read, which was given to me by Mike Fuller, and I know he would not mind me using his name, he's a government assassin. He was like my husband, a government assassin who did...
When you say assassin, you're talking like character assassination or kill people?
No, killing people.
Okay.
He's a mercenary, government mercenary.
Okay.
He was in Afghanistan and in Rhodesia, South Africa. And I met him and his wife through Sarah McClendon. He's a real wonderful patriot who is speaking out about what the NATO community and the Army and Marine Corps are doing.
And Sarah McClendon, she's an old warhorse, isn't she?
Sarah saved my life, literally.
Really?
Yeah. I had been having break-ins starting the night of March the 4th, after I was calling everywhere to see if I could find my husband. He would, disappear at times. And I found my husband's diary, which I have here, which they have been not anxious to have get out.
Uh-huh. No, they meaning?
General Sheehan, General Krulak, Marine Corps colonels, generals, Al Gray, Cook, and especially General Joy.
Joy.
General Jim Joy
Uh-huh.
and General Carl Steiner they're evil men. And they are in this diary meeting with my husband almost every day in Beirut. They trained the men in black who killed those people in Waco. It was General Joy and General Steiner. Steiner's army, dirty tricks, special operations. And this is what my husband does for a living, is train mercenaries, young boys from countries like Romania, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Haiti, all these countries. They're training them to be murderers. And the taxpayers' dollars are paying for this.
Okay, now they train them just through the normal channels of the military? These kids join the Army or the Marine Corps, and then they select these kids based on some criteria to train them?
They psychologically profile them. The profile, which is similar to my husband's and Lee Harvey Oswald's and McVeigh's and some of the others who were all part of this program. Jeffrey Dahmler was profiled and hidden. You know, what most Americans do not know is that all of these men were
Jeffrey
Army.
Dahmer, he has a military background?
Of course. They're all Army.
Oh, okay.
They were all picked out because they're perverted or twisted.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sexually perverted.
Sexually perverted, and therefore, you know.
Yeah.
Well, now I don't think McVeigh was perverted the way Dahmler was, but certainly the group that my husband is overseeing are twisted.
So part of the criteria, they look for people who have got something in their history that gives them a weird bend.
Yeah.
Like they were molested when they were a child,
Yeah.
or they come from dysfunctional families, abuse, whatever.
Strong mother, weak father, no father, poor. Because these guys are looking for security, so they will stay in the military and do anything for that security. This was my husband's scenario. My husband and Oswald are just two peas in a pod.
Huh.
Exactly the same personality, the same type, in the same elite group, I might add, which was doing work with communists and Russians, with Czechoslovakians and with Romanians. I met assassins, I met drug lords, Fahim Kordobawi, whose family were the drug lords in the Bekaa Valley. I mean, he knows the elite of the elite of the elite, and that's why I was warned twice not to talk.
And you were warned...
I was told that I would be killed. I was told that
Your husband warned you about this, or?
Oh, my husband warned me early on in it, but he knew that he loved me in the beginning. I'm sure he really did. But he's a robot, my husband, except when he's drinking. And I think that's why he drank, because the first 3 years of marriage, he was telling me everything. And I come from a very strong Protestant Southern culture, which, you know, when you're talking about shooting people like ducks, the only thing I can relate it to is my brothers going duck hunting, and that's what George would tell me it was like. Killing is just, you know, it's nothing. There's no emotion involved. You just get rid of somebody. And he said he was an existentialist and that these murders were necessary, and, you know, very matter of fact. And I'd sort of go, yep, and we'd be eating dinner, and I was trying to get him to know Christ, you know, to sort of understand a little bit about my background and America's background. But his group they are not Christians. They're what he calls existentialist, and they study German Clausewitz and Nietzsche, Sartre, Camus, Montesquieu. And his thesis at Princeton, which was written for him by a very good friend of his named Todeve, who was a French count, and his thesis was on this. And it was, supposedly it was in French, but my French is better than his. So he could not have written that by himself. I know that. I know it was written for him. But in the intelligence world, and in the communist world, in the world that my husband was in, one had to know French because all of the terrorist trainers and the guys who were funding all the guerrillas and everything were in Paris and New Orleans. They would go back and forth. Still, the 4th Marines is out of New Orleans. And that's been going on a long time, ever since Disraeli, even before, I think. But they had hit squads and, you know, undercover groups in New Orleans. And George would go to New Orleans, all the Marines. I mean, this is where they train, do terrorist training, Lake Pontchartrain and places like that.
Okay, and then this would be during the 1980s?
Yeah, 1980s.
Okay.
From the I think New Orleans has been a school for a place where debauchery and murder and cults and
flourished.
Yeah.
Well, there's a New Orleans connection with the JF Kennedy assassination.
Well, you see, Oswald, my husband and Oswald were in the same club. General Jim Joy is in that club. General Louis Buell, who is my husband's benefactor, or whatever you want to call it, is in that club. There is a, in fact, I've got the name of, there are Russians in that club.
Yeah, feel free to grab any reference materials.
Yeah,
You've got our
what I want to tell you about General Al Gray, my husband was the chief of staff for General Al Gray, who was the commandant of the Marine Corps. And I probably shouldn't say this on the tape, and you all can get rid of it, but he's a homosexual.
Gray.
Gray.
Okay.
He's what they call a cherry Marine. Now, I'm not anti. I'm trying to find my. I hope I've got it. Yeah, here it is.
Now, this
Vietnam
term cherry Marine,
Cherry
is that
Marine.
that's a common phrase in the military?
See, the thing is, they're guys and they're girls, and I just came from such a real prudish culture.
Yeah.
You know.
That's fine. You came from a normal culture.
And I'm not judging them, but the Vietnam War, I know a lot about that, about the MACSOG program and the Phoenix program, because George was involved with a very important part of that. Not important, really, but he and Al Gray and Louis Buell and Michael O'Boyle and Ollie Whipple were. Do you remember the Manguez and the Pueblo? Was it the
the seizure of that little ship?
Yes.
Yeah.
This was. It's run by the mob. Then it was a mob military partnership, joint. It was a joint operation in Korea and in Vietnam. The highest levels of the Marine Corps and the Army in those special operations levels, the individuals are actually in the mob. New Jersey.
You're talking about the mafia type mob?
I'm talking about the Brooklyn, New Jersey mob. My husband, Al Gray, Sheehan, they're all Brooklyn. Cap Weinberger. Heinz Kissinger, there's the Boston mob, which was shipping weapons back and forth to Northern Ireland. And I don't want to get too deeply involved in that, but it goes, Israel, some of the Zionists who came over from Germany, according to my husband, were, he works with those people. They do a lot of money laundering in the banks, cash transactions for the drugs that they're bringing over through Latin America, the Southern Mafia, the Dixie Mafia, which is now my husband's involved with in Miami. The military are all involved once they retire. They're, they go into this drug and secondary weapons sales. And before I forget, I want to find the name of this Russian who worked with Al Gray, who was my husband's boss, and trying to see where I wrote it. I may have to look and find that another.
It's no trouble at all. How are we doing over there, guys? Sound good? How much time is rolled on the clock? On your clock? You can speak. So
20 minutes.
20? Okay, good.
I can't find it right now. I'll find it.
Right.
The Vietnam was really important because a lot of experiments were done on boys who went over there.
Mm-hmm.
I had, since my husband disappeared and since they have been psychologically trying to destroy me, financially trying to destroy me, because I'm telling the truth. His first wife, I know, was murdered.
Okay.
She was, according to a psychiatrist whose name I probably won't give because he's an honorable man. I was given permission before I went public with Sarah McClendon at the press club anonymously, but they knew who I was on the 3rd of July, 1996, was when I came out with a small group of people. But before that time, they were trying to handle me, to try and get me to be quiet. They tried threatening me and so forth. And I'm trying to remember where I was, what I was going to, the point I was going to make. I can't remember now what I was going to. It was something important. Oh, yeah, General Jim Joy.
Yeah.
I called General Jim Joy on the phone. I was trying to find where my husband was because I didn't know whether I'd have any money to, food to eat or what. He just walked away, and I knew that the Marine Corps knew where he was. But I was being handled psychologically. On the 4th of March, my home was broken into. They had elaborate plans to handle me.
The 4th of March, 96?
1996.
96.
And keep in mind, he had disappeared on the 28th of December.
Of 96.
Of 96, 95.
Okay,
So put yourself in my shoes. I have no idea where he is. He's done this before, and each time I was totally traumatized. So I get...
What happened during this break-in?
Well, they were looking for the diary, which I have here.
Okay.
I don't have the original copy, but this is the diary.
Okay, can you lift it up so
Yeah,
we can...
sure.
Yeah, just...
This is it. It's his Beirut diary.
Kind of hold those. So
Yeah. This is it.
Okay.
And it's in his handwriting. The Beirut diary tells how the intelligence community, the Army and Marine Corps assassins, snipers, are how they operate in a city during a crisis. My husband was the liaison between the White House and President Jamal. So my husband is a friend of Scrokoff, McFarland's a Marine. All of these men are personal friends of George's. Colby, I spoke with personally on the phone. 2 weeks later, he was murdered. He went to Princeton. My husband knew him. He knew my husband. He told me, Colby told me that...
Now this is General Colby?
No, this is William Colby, who was head of the CIA.
Oh, okay, yes.
Who was murdered in a...
so-called boating accident.
I know exactly how that happened because, you see, the SEAL teams, SEAL Team 6, 4, 6, and 8, are on the East Coast, and then the odd numbers are on the West Coast. And some of the people who are affiliated with the SEALs, I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to say it. But
well, it wouldn't be hard for a SEAL to come from underwater and tip the boat over and make sure the man's dead, that sort of thing?
the Israelis train with the SEALs. They do a lot of wet ops, murders, over here because of some sort of arrangement. The young boys, I met 3 young assassins on a bus, going up back and forth to Sarah as I went on the bus because they were sabotaging my car so often. So I sat next to 2 young assassins, one from Romania, one from Haiti. And I let them know that I understand, you know, how it is. And this little boy cried. I won't mention which one it was because it may get back to him. But he told me it was the same scenario. His mother, he lives on $850 a month. Now these are mercenaries working. The taxpayers are paying mercenaries. The taxpayers are paying young men who are not citizens of the United States to kill innocent people, women and children. They get on a flight from Norfolk and Oceana. They fly to Stuttgart, and I was told this is what they do. Then they go by a special helicopter to countries like Turkey, like the part of Iraq, to Algeria, to parts of Africa, and they do wet ops. They'll just, you know, murder 5, 10, 20 people, and then they blame it on the Arabs or they blame it on somebody else, but it's actually NATO rogue assassins, because there are men from Australia, South Africa, Britain, that I've been able to determine, and a lot of these other little countries that are sort of wanting to get into NATO, they have little boys that they pick out, and they call them special. They use the word special, meaning elite, irregular, in order to entice these boys because they don't have much ego. So if you call being a criminal, in other words, they are protected. They know that they are above the law. That's what my husband's above the law. Judge John Moore is above the law. Colonel Barry Cantor, my husband's JAG colonel lawyer, is above the law. Grover Wright, Marine Corps. A lot of these guys who were judges had their wives gotten rid of. Judge John Moore had his first wife thrown into a mental institution before he became a judge. He battered her. And I spoke with a man who has a Purple Heart, 2 people who knew Hannah very well. And Hannah Moore was deeply in love with her husband. He got back from Vietnam. He was an Army Ranger. He battered her. He physically and psychologically abused her. And she started screaming, you know, doing because I was battered and bruised. A lot of wives are by these Vietnam vets. But if they're a colonel or if they're a rising star, the wife has got to be crazy because they've got too much invested in these men. And it's a very small cult. I mean, I have heard the things that they do when they're colonels. It's some of the same things that they do in Cap and Gown, which is the Princeton version of Skull and Bones. My husband went to Princeton after he went to the Hun School for 4 years.
Okay, now we should probably clarify a little bit about, you mentioned Skull and Bones, and many of the people wouldn't be familiar with that, and the cap and gown. So what are these clubs that these young inductees are pulled into? Secret societies?
Secret societies. And
again, is this to make them feel super special?
Yes.
And also put a control on them
Yes.
so that you never tell these secrets?
Yes.
Oh.
That's it. You have got it.
You know, I've heard a lot of child molesters. I mean, people who are not connected with the military, just plain old child molesters, will molest a child and then tell them, now if you ever tell, you know, they'll take a cat and strangle it and kill it or something. This is what I'm going to do to your mother. This is what I'll do to you.
Yes.
Bad things will happen if you ever tell.
That's right.
And children grow up believing that I must never ever tell. And they don't, generally.
That's right.
Unless someone comes along to help them see the light and come out of it.
Yes. And you see, my husband is frightened to death. I believe that his brother was murdered to keep him in, because he had gone through 4 years of this mind control. And the man who did it, you can see this on the video, his name was Charles Caddock, and another man named Alexander Robinson.
Okay, Charles Caddock.
Caddock.
And the other one?
Alexander Robinson. Alexander Robinson was a Marine, very well-connected Presbyterian family, whose family member was the influential one who brought over the Saudis. The original Saudi head of Saudi Arabia was George told me all this about Mohammed Faisal, Khalid Faisal, and Saud Faisal, and there were something like 32 brothers of the then in the mid-50s, the ordained, you know, whoever was head of Saudi Arabia. It was actually the United States who chose that person, because the United States, through Charles Caddock and that group, murdered the good one, the one whom everybody liked, who was well educated, and who was normal. In, I believe it was 1952, 1953, 1954, in Paris, the universal Saudi, the well-educated Saudi, was poisoned.
And what would his name be?
Charles Caddock.
I don't suppose it's all that important, but anyway.
I'm trying to remember. I think it was Fahim, or he died in Paris. And so his brother, his half-brother or whatever, was the father of all these 32 boys, and the 3 oldest now were snuck into the United States. I have a degree in history, Virginia history, undergraduate degree, and master's in Scottish history. And being a Southerner, we always look at, you know, past is prologue. And I jumped into the Saudi Arabian books to try and find out something about the Hun School, which is in Princeton, started by a physicist connected with Einstein in that group. So I was looking for the Hun School because I knew they went there. And they're in all the brochures. They're very proud to say, you know, we have the Saudi royals went here. President Cheeseborough brags about going over there and being wined and dined, and you know. So I only found one reference, but it was a reference that said something like they went to a prep school in the United States. That's all they said. Well, it was the Hun School, and my husband was one of the playmates. Charles Caddock was the bodyguard, quote-unquote teacher for these guys. So they would go out and play in the woods, and they were doing homosexual things with them. You know, I mean, there was a lot of money. They bought a big house.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay, now, I was momentarily distracted.
Okay.
Explain to me a little bit about this, the homosexual event here.
Well, George, for the first 3 years of our marriage, was drinking entirely too much, and he was trying to let me know about his world, and I'm not judging him. He's a bisexual.
Okay. And he
believe.
needed help.
He needed help. He needed
Still
love.
does.
He needed cry. He
Yeah.
still does.
Mm-hmm.
He really needs help, and the handlers knew that I was changing him. I was taking him away from this crazy cult
Right.
that he'd been in all these years. And I mean, we were going to church. He even walked down the aisle one time when Tony Evans preached at Scope. I mean, he was overwhelmed. And
At Scope. No,
at Scope in Norfolk, it's a big auditorium.
Oh, okay.
And so, but he was a little boy when he was, it's mind control. MK Ultra, somebody said. They had a group of men, psychiatrists in New Jersey. I don't know where this place was, but they would go, and even his roommates in Princeton told me about it. George never, intentionally, he never introduced me to any of his friends. So I had to cold call all these people. I got their names and addresses, telephone numbers. I called all these roommates at the Hun School and at Princeton.
Mm-hmm.
They told me things about George and, holding hands with, with Caddick and other people, about being a cheerleader and going off and so forth.
Now, a cheerleader, this is a kind of a trade name, right?
No, he was a cheerleader for the
At Princeton?
At Princeton.
Okay.
And he traveled with the football team.
Okay.
And here is a guy like that. They put him in the Marine Corps. I don't think that was very nice. Do you know what I'm saying? It was hard for him. But
it was part of the long-term vision.
Absolutely. They wanted him long-term. And it's because of the Saudis. This is what I believe and what his roommate believes. He had a roommate at Princeton who was also at the Hun, who's a dear, dear, wonderful. His mother is an Anglican. His father was a Jewish doctor from Brooklyn, and Jack is a dear, and we talk to each other a lot on the phone. George sort of, dismissed him because George was getting in with another crowd. George got into Cap and Gown, which is the same kind of fraternity. I mean, it's an eating club at Princeton for intelligence officers.
It's Cap and Gown. Would they have anybody involved that wasn't intelligence-oriented?
Football players and so forth. But I have a feeling that Cap and Gown has a lot of intelligence officers and boys who may have been raped. Of course, they'd never talk about it.
Right.
But I know that the initiation is, they get very drunk, and even in the Marine Corps they do that. It's called dining in. They have the shellback ceremony. They do a lot of homosexual enticement. The boys are, when they come in, when they're new recruits, they strip them nude, they violate their personal parts. There's a lot of that is going on.
What about
even now?
Tailhook?
Yeah.
Is there a connection?
Yeah, sure, because the cream of the crop is doing this. They're having group sex parties.
And that was a Navy operation too, wasn't it?
Yeah, but the Navy and the Marine Corps.
Of course not. Maybe we ought to for those
That's another.
that tailhook, they don't know anything about. Tailhook was refresh our memories.
Well, tailhook. In fact, I when I was single in Norfolk, I know one of the people who was deeply involved with tailhook, who was the captain of the Saratoga, was very much involved with this kind of behavior. And I know a lot about the, see, I never thought about group sex. This is so awful for me to contemplate that these orgies are going on all over the Mediterranean, that the captains, lieutenants, the men who rise to the top are the ones who are picked to play the games, the pool parties, the nude pool parties. And they have secretaries who come in. I've talked to 3 guys, and of course my husband, who went to these parties. But what they do is, and this is General Al Gray, who was the main prime mover, they would go to a place like Aix-les-Rosés, where Charles Caddock, this teacher who inducted, got my husband into it, he retired in one of these all-male party houses on the Mediterranean. I mean, that's where and my husband kept up with him all through the years.
But these sex parties and orgies, they're all homosexual in nature, or
well,
is there some heterosexual?
They start off with the wild secretaries. It's kind of, you know, my husband did those in Indonesia. He did them at a place in Northern Virginia with his first wife. I did not know any of this. I knew absolutely none of this when I married him. He told me he was loyal to his wife. He wanted me to think he was just apple pie, because I'm just a one-man woman.
Right.
When I took that oath to marry him, love, honor, and obey, that's me. But he, when he was married to his first wife, was just an addict. He was a sexual addict, an alcoholic addict. He loves, you know, terror, and his whole little soul was just being sucked away from him desperately. And he needs Christ. He needed me day in and day out. He did not need to be. What he's doing now is running more of these operations.
You know, as you describe this, I can't help but think of Bill Clinton.
Well, of course he was. He was one of those profile boys. But the difference between Bill Clinton, and I'm not saying Bill Clinton's better, but Bill Clinton did not he didn't know anything about the assassinations. Bill Clinton, when I was living with Sarah McClendon, the senior White House correspondent who saved my life, because she said, Mrs. Griggs, you get up here to Washington right now or you're dead. You're going to be dead. And I still feel as though I probably will be. I'll certainly be financially ruined. They are still doing psychological operations in my home, sabotaging my car, messing with my telephone, my radio. You cannot believe what I've been through in the last 2 years. It is horrible. And it's being done to other women and other wives and other men who don't go along with the program. They are murdering Marines. They're murdering sailors.
Of course, one of the best ways for you to stay alive is to do what you're doing.
Really?
Reduce this, absolutely. Reduce this to video, get this scattered all over the country. They won't touch you, because if you're dead, that validates everything you're saying, see. So,
well, they poison people.
Publicity is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, one of the things that was happening to me after, I must tell you about General Joy. I found his name all through the diary. And what was really strange was that George had mentioned him early on in the marriage, but then after a certain incident at Camp Lejeune, which I think is very interesting, relating to tailhook and something that I did there. I'll tell you about that if I can remember. I called. It took a lot for me to get General Joy's phone number, because the Marine colonels were not going to tell me, because they knew I was investigating. So nobody would tell me about General Joy. I called a person in George's address book who was a general, pretending that, I was updating my Christmas card list.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to find Jim Joy's telephone number. He said, oh, he's up there. He's running morale, welfare, recreation for the world, a payoff job with the mob. And he's living outside of Quantico, and here's his phone number. So I call him up, and keep in mind, my husband is infamous, Princeton graduate, chief of staff for Al Gray, who runs all the dirty tricks for the Army. Linda Tripp worked for Carl Steiner, who was a partner of, Jim Joy and Carl Steiner and my husband were the triumvirate in Beirut.
Okay.
And Linda Tripp worked for Carl Steiner down there
This would be approximately
in the 80s. She and her husband were both Delta Force duos. They send them, but then they divorced, so that broke up that. But she's a dirty tricks person, Linda. Anyway, so I call General Joy and I say, General Joy, this is Kay Griggs, and I'm George Griggs' wife, chief of staff under Al Gray, head of half the world, dirty tricks, special operations, wet ops. And he goes, no, I don't believe I know your husband. Exactly his words. And I'm taping it, by the way, because they took my tape. They started coming in and putting sticky stuff and running my, just mind jagging me.
putting sticky stuff.
On the tapes, and they would put the tapes on different, they would go to a lot of trouble. They would take things that I said on one tape and put it on another, and they were having fun with me psychologically. But I taped this conversation with General Joy, and I said, well, that's really strange, General Joy, that you don't know my husband, because I'm sitting here on my bed, and I'm looking at my husband's diary that he kept the whole time he was in Beirut. And you're in there almost on every page, you're in there a lot. And you're going over to Cyprus and Rome, and you're, getting money for weapons, and, and then they're going to Tel Aviv, and they're doing this and that. And I said, you mean you don't know my husband, George Griggs? And you're a Marine, and he's a colonel? He went, oh, that George Griggs. Because he knew I had the diary.
I see.
Then he said, oh, Miss Griggs, let me call you back. Let me call you back. So he had to confer with General Sheehan, General Joy, General Gaiman, General Hartzog, and his little cabal, particularly General Gray and General Krulak. So he called me back, and he was just like a little puppy dog. He said, oh, Miss Griggs, I'm going to be in Norfolk on the, the night of the 5th, 6th, and 7th. I'll be at a morale, welfare, recreation meeting at the Marriott Hotel, and I would like to meet with you when I get there. I'll be getting in around 5 o'clock, and I could we could go to dinner, or you could come and have breakfast the next morning. We could eat, blah, blah, blah. Or 11 o'clock, now I have to speak at this luncheon engagement. You're welcome to come to that. Or we can meet at, he went through every hour of the whole time. He could not have been more insistent about meeting me if he'd been my father, my birthday or something. And so
you did meet.
I did, but I was afraid of him because I knew he was an assassin.
Joy.
General Jim Joy, the one who got Noriega out of Panama. He and Sheehan, the one who was behind the whole operation in Panama. This is a powerful guy. He and Carl Steiner. Mutt and Jeff. Waco, they trained all the guys in Waco who went and did what they did to David Koresh. They're the ones behind all the black helicopters and Sheehan. They're the ones, you know, doing all the stuff down there at Kathy McDaniel's down at, you know, in Fort Polk, Fort Hood.
That's something new on me. Kathy McDonald, Daniel?
Kathy McDaniel's had a little talk show. She's a wife of the daughter of the mayor down there at Fort Polk.
Okay.
The little town outside of Fort Polk. And there were a lot of unusual things happening. And because she was talking about it, excuse me, they took her radio show off the air. And they tried to, it's a long story, but anyway, so General Joy, I got in contact with the NCIS.
That's Fort Polk in Louisiana.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But I met with the NCIS guy and a Marine that I just met cold call because I was kind of worried about what would happen to me, you know, meeting him. So may I go to the ladies' room?
Certainly. Matter of fact, Steve suggested that we break.
I've had to sort of go to the late. That's why I've been sort of antsy.
Steve suggests we break at 5 after, and I think it was a good idea. Let's break and we'll pick up right where we're.
Right.
Well, I think you're fine doing it.
We're rolling? Is this one rolling? All three cameras rolling right now? They are rolling?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yep.
Everybody check in. All right. Here we go. Okay, now Steve, come on over here and take a quick glance at the at this monitor. Mm-hmm. Notice how she's framed here. Does mine correspond about the same?
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Oh. I gotta take a better look. Oh.
So that we cut back and forth, we are.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Actually, yours is like you say. Yours is a little bit tighter.
Okay, just take it wide.
You want this one in a little tighter?
No, no.
Okay.
Mm-mm. She's just right.
I tell you, I have the perfect reference. I can tell now those chairs are giving a perfect reference.
Except that I'm a little bigger than she is, so I may stand a little taller in the chair.
Okay. Whoa. Whoa, yeah. Oh, the distance, maybe. Yeah, let's just, I'm just going to hold what she says.
Okay, yeah, we don't have to split hairs over it. Okay, we're rolling. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. We have liftoff. We're rolling. This is part number 2 of this interview. All right. Now, we have discussed just a little bit of a recap here. All right, a little bit about your background, about the psychological profile that these guys look for. Let's see, we've discussed the diary. We've discussed Kaddock and Alexander
Robinson.
Couldn't read my writing. Thank you. And
I have a picture of Kaddock.
yes, I noted that. We're going to inject that. We'll inject. In fact, we should have a little session here where we just go through pictures at the tail end of this.
Yeah.
Picture. We discussed tail hook and.
You know what tail hook means, don't you?
Now, what is tail hook? Uh-oh. I got a feeling.
Yeah.
Is it a homosexual reference?
Yeah, sure.
Really?
Sure.
Did you know that, Steve? Isn't it something?
Yeah.
And the average person on the street has no idea.
No.
You know, it's like Watergate. Well, the Watergate Hotel, that makes sense. And tail hook probably is some reference to, you know what I honestly thought it was? When you refuel a jet or something.
It is. But you look, see, the planes look like this. Because, see, I was told this by Jerry Unruh. And Jerry Unruh was a captain when I met him. We were just partying. You know, I had a group of gals, and we were all school friends. And everybody hung around this place called Poppy's in Virginia Beach. It was the place in the mid-'80s when I was at the Virginia Center for World Trade. Well, Jerry was in there. He's an intelligence operative with Scrowcroft, Crow, you know, this whole McFarlane, Ed Wilson, who's a really good friend of my husband's, who's a really bad guy. Anyway, they're all some of them are doing this Rush River Lodge thing, you know, which Angleton was doing, where Woodward would go to these big orgy parties. And George went to a few of those. But this, you see, is the plane, and it kind of looks like that.
Okay.
And it refuels.
Uh-huh.
See, that's what the hook is for.
That's called the
refueling.
tail hook.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
But it has a double meaning.
A double entendre, sure.
Because and I went to the preceding show 2 weeks ago, and they had the tail hook booth, and I have some stuff, I don't think I have it with me, but tail hook souvenirs, because they are really trying to promote that, you know, the charitable function of that organization.
Yes, of course. Now, the fact that that cover got blown on those tail hook things, that
Paula
was a
Coggin.
major snafu, right?
She had to try very hard to get that out.
That was at Camp Lejeune?
No, I think it was in Las Vegas.
Okay.
But, oh, my thing went on in Camp Lejeune before tail hook, and this is why I got flagged.
Oh.
Because I stopped all the go-go dancers in the officers' clubs, and they got very mad with me.
Ooh.
I can tell you that story. It's true.
Yeah, but why, you didn't realize what you're doing at the time?
No, I was just incensed, you know, that they would allow topless women, young girls, in the officers' club dining room while I was trying to eat late one night. And George says, well, you know, you just have to get used to it. If you think this is anything, you ought to see what goes on in Okinawa. Well, this was 91, 90. It was before tail hook. And the Lord is always with me. Sometimes I don't know where he is, but this particular night, it was about 9 o'clock, and I was starving. And I was really mad because his reaction wasn't, I'm sorry, this is offensive. Do you want to go in town to eat or something? He didn't do that. He attacked me. It was a chance to educate me the way they were educated.
I see.
Get used to it, bitch. You know,
Yeah.
Excuse my French.
That's right.
But that's really what he was trying to do. Well, they were all young married officers. Now, I worked at the chamber, and this is taxpayer money. This looks bad. They had, you know, wedding bands on. And one of the guys, two of the guys goes out with one of the girls. So I'm going, after having said, don't you see anything wrong with this picture? And getting no background. I thought, oh, boy, I've got a camera in my pocketbook. I am going to see Marty and Oogie, my old roommate from St. Mary's, little Episcopal Junior College in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I said, whoa, little Lucille Ball comes out. And I just kind of grabbed that little camera with the flash, and I get me 3 little flashes of scattering people. So
Just
light.
because the camera's going off?
Yes. So that said to me, it proved to him, God, truth is light, light is truth. You know, hey, this isn't. I mean, God proved it. I didn't do it. I didn't argue. I just took pictures. They scattered. Then what happened?
What happened to the pictures?
Well, he tried to grab my camera.
He?
My husband.
Right.
But there were still some men in there, you see, and 2 of the girls. And they were looking at me like, you are, the girls were probably thinking, oh, you know, but the guys, they saw older colonel, chief of staff here, wife. It was bad from the perspective of me being a wife, witnessing this, being ordered to shut up. So I took the camera when he wanted to grab it from me, and I went like this. I mean, it was real battle time, major. My brother was a championship wrestler. you know, and I don't know anything about holes, but I knew this was self-preservation time. And I just said, well, I'm going to the ladies' room, huh?
Yeah.
So I went to the ladies' room, and I hid the darn thing. And he wanted to know where it was. We had a major battle. But the end thing that happened was I wrote a nice letter, found out the name of the manager of the club, because I knew protocol. I knew you can't go and just really mess everybody up. And I sent a letter saying, is this normal to have it, to the club manager? But I sent copies of the pictures and the letter to the wife of the general commander of the base and the wife of the commandant.
Oh, man. You wanted to get in trouble.
With the pictures.
Uh-huh.
No, I mean,
Oh, you thought you were gonna...
helping the wives.
Yeah. The wives, at this point, no doubt, are privy to all this stuff, right?
Yeah. See, I thought in the real world, this is what you do. Somebody... But what happened was I went home, and the wives were meeting there, and I told them what I had done, and Carol and Milla said, oh, no, you didn't do that, did you? George won't get promoted. You know, he was trying to make general. But Louis Buell had already died. He wouldn't have made general anyway because of Sue. I already found out about that. But I didn't know that at the time. So, but Charlotte Moore, whose family are better educated, and she's kind of the leader of the pack because she's more rational than the rest of the wives. She said, Kay, thank you very much. We appreciate what you did for us. And then all the rest of them kind of, you know, they're like little puppets too. But then I found out from Brooks West that I was flagged. That General Gray had me marked as a troublemaker.
Gotcha.
So after that, no more stories while he's drinking. You know, it was a very, he was having to balance them and me. You know, he was, I think he was challenged by me because he, you know, he knew that I was a free spirit. He didn't understand Christ. He didn't understand what my boundaries are, but because he was a little bit intimidated by my sense of freedom and my, you know, openness, which comes from a complete understanding of where Christ is in my life, you know, and I follow in his footsteps, but I'm a free spirit because I'm created independently, as we all are, and my husband never had that ability to be free from the time he was a teenager.
Because early on he was made captive to these other matters, the homosexual encounters and the shame that brings and the control. So he was a bent twig early on.
Yeah, and he had the Saudis were beginning to pile into Russell House at the Hun School in Princeton, which is the school that my husband was in for 4 years on scholarship. He never saw his parents in 8 years. Now think about this. His parents were shipped to California, I believe strategically so that they could control his mind.
Okay.
He was too poor to fly out there. I think he did go one time when he was ROTC on a flight that took him forever and a day to get out there. But he had an uncle later on who bought a house in Princeton when he was in college. So he had a little bit of nurturing. And this uncle became his father.
Okay.
And this uncle's 2 sons and the next door neighbor became his wife. He knew he had to marry because of what he had gone through, and it was, I think, so shameful and so hard on him that he married right at graduation day, practically, from Princeton. University, where he had 4 years in ROTC. And he was in the Cap and Gown Club, which, as I mentioned before, is an intelligence sort of football kind of scholarship club. But what's interesting is my uncle, who was in intelligence, Ben Delaney, went through exactly the same hoops. I was thinking, you know, when I met my husband, this is, and it probably was God in many ways, but I thought, isn't it amazing that Uncle Ben, who was the football quarterback star for Princeton, the one year they won the whole national thing, he was, he went to the Hun school. His father and mother were both killed or something happened to them. And I think they were a fairly well-to-do, prominent family. He was handsome, wonderful, just a neat man. So he went on scholarship to the Hun. And then, and he went in, it was crew and all these other things. He was in Cap and Gown. He was, he played on the football team. He wasn't a cheerleader. My husband was a cheerleader. But they were in exactly the same pattern. ROTC scholarship. They left ROTC. They were dependent on the government, on the intelligence community, you know, selling weapons to whatever country. I know the country, but in other words, they were doing work for the joint under the table all these years.
Okay, and directly under whose instructions to sell these weapons? Do you know that?
Yeah.
Okay, and who would that be?
Well, it's the Israeli Zionist group in New York.
Mossad? No.
Well,
what would they
yeah,
call
but
themselves?
everybody thinks Mossad, like they think CIA is just a bogus sort of thing. It's really Army intelligence that does just about everything. They run a lot of the psychological profiling, which is done at Quantico with the FBI. It's all a very small group. Harvard professors connected with, you know, the Tavistock and Dar es Salaam, and there's a sexual perversion group in Vienna and one in Colorado. I think that little girl was part of that experiment, you know, who was
John
murdered.
Benet Ramsey?
Yeah, yeah, because I had some...
Well, you know, that raises an interesting point, because here's a high-profile murder that goes nowhere. No investigation, nobody's pinned. It just goes on and on and on.
The parents are involved in that program.
But somebody higher
High
up
level.
is protecting them.
Absolutely.
And the same thing that you're describing about the military.
Sure.
If you're in the clique, you can get away with murder.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Murder, literally murder. And I had a group of visitors. I used to be set up by the State Department, my husband, who had power in the State Department through both Caspar Weinberger and, well, his whole crowd. I mean, Caspar Weinberger, George Bush, Colby, Casey. My husband was in that clique. He was in the Princeton Marine Corps clique. Rob, Warner, you know.
You're talking about Senator Rob.
Yeah,
and
they're all
Warner.
Marines. Pat Robertson, all 4th Marines. I mean, they're all involved in this. They know, they're running everything.
Now, you mentioned Pat Robertson. You're talking about the 700 Club, Pat Robertson.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a power thing there. And it's all male, it's all white, and they know the murders are going on. They're surgical, they're strategic, they're political. But what I was going to tell you is I was used because I was the most gullible in high school. And I'm very, very spiritual, and I love people. So, and I was driven to meet all these people from all over the world for some reason. So they would feed me people because they knew I would react. It's kind of like Monica and Bill. I think they put Monica in there to have something on Bill. That's my own feeling. Sarah McClendon feels the same way. Because...
And Linda Tripp was there to guide the situation.
Absolutely. Of course. Linda Tripp was Delta Force. Linda Tripp was trained by Carl Steiner, who's in the diary with my husband. Carl Steiner is called a snake, and he tried to trip up Schwarzkopf. I mean, he was trying to take the whole Iraqi thing over because they had been baiting, you know, using the Israeli rogues in Turkey. They were having little zigzag wars. It's all to sell weapons. It's all about weapon sales. It's all about drugs. It's all about funny money.
Making money.
Of course. And the head, Krulak, who is the Commandant of the Marine Corps, his father, Victor Krulak, worked with this Russian, Czechoslovakian double agent who was worked with Al Gray, who was enlisted at that time, rose right up to the top because they were involved with Butcher and this whole crowd that was trying to pick fights. And they were not, they were Army and Navy together, joint. And George kept saying, George calls them the members of the firm. He calls them the members of the firm. I've heard the Brotherhood. They're very close. And it's a small group, and it's very hierarchical. I had Caspar Weinberger's bodyguard farm me when I was at Sarah McClendon's.
Now, farm you.
Yeah, that's a term that they use.
Where they cultivate?
They well, not cultivate, but just want to find out kind of. They're doing profiling on me. Women are hard to profile because we're very easy. We're very easy if you understand women. And I think they need more women in human intelligence because we'd solve a lot of these problems like overpopulation or whatever it is very quickly. Because we're the ones who teach the men how to talk, how to communicate. We think on 20 levels at once. You know, we're very spiritual, we're very practical, all at the same time. And they make mistakes by pegging women as crazy when really they're very anxious to solve problems. They're just very frustrated to see a lot of wacko things going on that don't need to be going on, but the guys don't see it. So with my husband and so forth, I was used. They profiled me. They knew I loved international people because I'd already demonstrated that. And there was a group of sexual psychiatrists from Vienna who came over. I have pictures of them. I was their escort. George was already gone, and I was intrigued that they were still sending me people.
Okay, now you referred to them as sexual psychologists?
Yeah, there's a whole range of psychiatrists who study perversion, sexual perversion. Harvard, Yale, Johns Hopkins, and this Colorado group. Dar es Salaam, where they train the black African terrorists. They train them in interrogation. They train the JAGs in interrogation methods and so forth. And a lot of these guys got their experience in Vietnam. Intentionally, they took these little boys. That's what they're doing in Bosnia right now. They're training future leaders in perversion. They have a school. The British have a school that George was working with in Indonesia for a year. My husband was setting up there was already a program on East Timor, a little place there in the mountains, that had been set up by the Australians during World War II. It was involved, I think, with Burma and, you know, some of the killings that were going on in China and so forth. That T. Parker Host, this man who now controls my husband with Bob Edwards, T. Parker Host, this is how they got together. T. Parker Host, I knew when I was the assistant director of the Virginia Center for World Trade. I was the first woman on the board of the Foreign Commerce Club. I was very involved politically, and I was having a ball. And I met T. Parker Host through someone else. I was the chairman of a board of all these international shippers and brokers. I was just a, sort of a glorified secretary, public relations person. Now, T. Parker Host was the Finnish consul, and at one time he'd been the Norwegian consul, the Icelandic consul. I thought he was a really nice guy because he was outgoing, he seemed Virginian. I didn't know that much about him. But it turns out he has one shipping agency when I meet him in '85. He knows my husband's profession instantly because he brags about being with the mobs. The mob runs the port of Norfolk. I mean, it's terrible to say, the bankers, and then they have I can't say that.
You can't say what?
No. The ports are run by, it's a homosexual hierarchy.
Okay, it makes, that's not objectionable.
Well, okay. And in Norfolk, it's Walter Chrysler, Phil Hornthal, they have the rich ones, and then they get the little ones in by introducing them to the big guys. It's like George met Einstein. Einstein was in that little ring that the Saudis were in. It was a very elite.
No,
Camus,
you're saying Einstein?
Albert Einstein
Okay.
was in that little Princeton ring before he died. And
Okay.
George, they partied together. Anyway, so the Norfolk crowd runs the port. It's very organized and so forth. And I knew the person who was running the Maritime Association shipping agency, very nice man who was that way. But I didn't know it, I went out with him. I like him very much. I mean, he's a very nice person. But
And completely homosexual.
Completely. But he liked me, and I thought he was wonderful.
Many homosexuals are very
he's
engaging
a very,
people.
very nice guy. Well, his best friend was T. Parker Host. He lived with him for a while. Well, I didn't think anything about Parker because, he'd been married and had a couple of sons, and I thought, well, this is just a guy who's moved away from Newport News for some reason and settled in Norfolk. I thought it was unusual. He didn't have any friends. I didn't know. But it wasn't because of that. It was because Parker had some questionable associations with mob figures, with assassins. He was in the Burma Special Operations Command. He liked living a dangerous life, and he bragged about it to others. My husband and he gravitated to one another. And I thought it was wonderful because my husband didn't seem to have any friends. So I sort of fixed him up with Parker. Well, Parker's the one who did me in, Parker plotted, and it's a long story, but basically, and this sounds petty, but I wouldn't go out with him. And I'm not saying I did anything that was, it's just that he wasn't my type.
Obviously.
Well, I mean, but he just was, he's boorish, he's loud, he's kind of rude.
So you're saying even just in a social context?
Yeah. So what happened was, because my husband is so close to Bush and McFarland and Scrowcroft and all these guys, Parker starts getting in with my husband's friends and cultivating them. And he goes from having one shipping agency to dotted all over the place. He goes from being a Democrat in petty little Virginia politics and being the Icelandic Finnish consul to having big shipping deals going through Iceland and Finland. and Norway. And my husband's setting up deals in Moss, Norway, which I was the president of the Sister City Association. I was being used while they were setting up, you know, shipment places, transshipment places. I mean, I was witnessing all of this, and it all came back to me, just boom, like that. But Parker, it was so interesting. We had a hearing. I had a hearing with my husband. That very day, George Bush was in town. My husband was in town. My home was broken into while I was in court. Very strategically, I was called by a Marine colonel named Jack, who is very involved with the maritime shipping business, and he knew that I know a lot about that. He called me and invited me as a guest of his to attend the George Bush huge banquet with John Warner while my house was being robbed. My car was sabotaged that day. And guess who introduced George Bush? T. Parker Host. Now, he made it to the big time.
You know, Alexander Haig is another one. You can help yourself to any coffee or anything out there.
Yeah, he's a friend.
Alexander Haig, he rose from nothing to top dog just overnight. That's because he's in the club.
Oh, of course he's in the club. Now, how he's in the club, you see.
Now, all these guys.
Henry Kissinger, Heinz Kissinger. Oh, I have a story.
Oh, we all suspect Henry's a queer.
Oh,
but
yeah, I have a first-hand story from Bob, who was there in Cambodia with Heinz.
Okay, you call him Heinz.
Henry.
Yeah, okay.
Heinz. His real name is Heinz Kissinger.
Okay. We'll straighten out. We got a light that fell down, boys. Did you notice that? We got to be alert to notice all these little things. And that's very hot, by the way.
Haig was an army.
Just a second. Let's get this straight here, because that is a hot light, and you'll burn your fingers if you don't touch it. By the way, as long as we're kind of in an unofficial break here, did you have to read my note while I was writing it?
See just part of it.
When I was writing it? Or only when I held it up?
When you held it up over here.
Okay.
I made an adjustment.
Well, I was starting to write. I wrote, widen her a bit. And then I looked up. Well, lo and behold, he's done it. So I thought, well, maybe he could read this over my shoulder. That's cool. And then...
No, he did.
Oh, you saw it and interpreted.
I've seen you.
You could read it from here?
Oh, that's cute. This is, y'all are wonderful. What a team.
And then
What a team you are.
you could, thank you? Yeah, okay.
Actually, all you got to do, if you'd like to just tip up a little bit, I'll...
Okay. Because the thing of it, when she's illustrating something and using her hands, well then, seize on that and open it up so that we don't lose the lower part of her hands. You know, not far enough down to where, you know, strategically we get out of focus, but just, that's cool. All right, we're back, and this is good. Let's go back to... we want to talk about Henry Kissinger, but also I introduced the idea about George Bush. 3, 2, 1. Now, so George Bush, I mean, all these people rise up through the ranks, the same club. Right. No wonder, you know, I saw a little TV clip one time where a reporter was asking George Bush and others about the Order of the Skull and Bones. All these guys were shocked that somebody even mentioned the term, and they just would not discuss it at all.
Right.
And the reporter said, I understand that as part of the oath you don't discuss it. And George just flat out said, it's just not to be discussed. And that was the end of the subject. Now, that's because, I mean, if this really got out, that these guys are all inducted because they've got some kind of homosexual thing on them.
Indoctrination. I mean, or induction. They have to do that.
Yeah.
They do that.
Yeah.
Even in a coffin. And it's even now coming into the military totally. The chiefs do that. They put them in the coffin. They do the bowling ball trick.
Okay, you're going to explain this. What happens when you get in the coffin? Why do you get in a coffin?
Oh, they get, when you get your eagles, that's a German thing.
Okay.
You know, it's what the German high command did, and most of them, you know, had the boyfriends and stuff, the Krupps and all of that. It is a German thing that they say goes back to Greece, and it's all the male Marine-looking men that they do it with. See? So now the chiefs have to do that. What they do is they get, George said it's like a zoo. They get everybody really drunk. And they sometimes call it dining in. Shellback is another time that they do it. Not everybody does it, but the ones who do it, if they're young, they get right up to the top. It's a
Okay, well, what actually do they do? They've got a coffin. They get
anal
inside this.
sex. Oh, that they do. They put them in the coffin and they do things.
Okay, they perform things
Yeah,
on each other.
yeah, while they're all around there going drunk and
I see. So there's a guy in the coffin.
yeah, and he's the one who
Is the recipient of all the acts.
right, right. Yeah.
Probably safe to conclude these are oral sex acts on this guy or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Okay.
oral and anal, whatever.
Yeah.
But
But what's the significance of the coffin?
I don't know.
I mean, it's the mystique
But-
about the skull
But
and bones
what's
and death.
interesting is now the young SEALs, Delta Force, the ones who go from Army to BUDS, the BUDS training SEALs,
Buds
BUDS is the emerging SEAL group,
Oh, I see. They're budding seals.
budding SEALs.
I see.
And they have to break into houses. Their training exercise is to break into civilians' houses
For practice.
for practice. They broke into my house. When George and I were first married, I had many underwear. You know, this is terrible to say, but lingerie. I had lots of, I didn't buy much, but it all disappeared. And then when the psyching was beginning, I had white blouses, but they would all have black dots on them. I'd say, George, here's another blouse with a black dot.
It was just a little message.
This was somebody's message, Or I would, after George left, it was batteries in a drawer. You can't tell the police I opened up a drawer where I had 6 batteries and now I've got 50 batteries. They're going to say, well, of course you're crazy, And I started my little sob with a screwdriver. And, I was always looking around for screwdrivers. Well, one day I come home and there are about 12 screwdrivers on the table, neatly placed. Well, you can't call the police and say, I've got 12 screwdrivers, You can't tell people that you've got black dots on all your white blouses. Your shoes are disappearing. And then, this is really, I called the police the first break-in, which was the night of March the 4th, the night before I went to see General Joy at the Marriott.
Yeah.
Well, I had already called the police when I was battered because I was just bruises. I made O.J.'s wife look like Marilyn Monroe. I mean, you talk about. And I was doing this because I thought it would help him, have 45s put to my head, and he's laughing. He'd strangle me and put his finger on my jugular vein, and he'd just say, now don't you dare move, or I'd be lying in bed and he'd do a jap where he'd just push me off the bed. You can't believe what horror I went through to try and get this man to understand what Christ's love is about. People say, oh, well, you should have left. Well, I took my marriage vows seriously. I knew he was injured psychologically by the war, by whatever he was made to do. So, I'm fine. I just sacrificed a lot. I was in a big wrestling match with a crazy guy, But I still love the little boy within. He's very troubled. But anyway, I called the police after a number of little break-ins. And guess what? The policeman they sent was a little short guy with a short haircut whose name was Shorty Satterwhite.
Okay.
And Shorty Satterwhite was saying, oh, now, Miss Griggs, now you're just making this up. Now, Miss Griggs, this is you're just traumatized. Your husband's gone, blah, blah, blah. I found out he was a 20-year Marine.
Okay.
And not only that, but there's another part of his life. But that's okay. I mean, he's a nice guy. But he was a Marine.
And he takes orders.
Of course he does. He's still reserve. So I think, okay, I'll call the FBI. You know, I'll let them know what's going on. I heard about the FISA court and that they, you know, because I'm talking about William Colby, maybe they think I'm a threat because I know all these international people. So I'm just going to call them and tell them what's going on. So I call Torrance, who's the head of the FBI, and he's too busy, you know, too busy. So he sends this guy, Dan McNally, out. And Dan McNally is a very nice guy, and he has this girl interview me, and I type out something about Georgia's history and what I know. Guess who else is a 20-year Marine? Dan McNally. And it just so happens that Dan McNally's best friend, and he's not married either, but that's all right, his best friend, who is from North Carolina and never married, is a best friend of Fred Hentz, who's the one who took me to this place, Mahi Maz, where I had the 2 death threats, who was graduated from college in flat 59. He was intelligence. His father was a German high, part of the Kaiser's elite group. He was NATO colonel, which I thought was pretty neat, and that's why they knew the profile. Kay likes NATO people because she's going to learn a little bit about another culture, you know. And I'm not saying that because his family were high command, but he was also an existentialist. And
okay, and again, for our viewers that may not know the term existentialist, you mean?
An existentialist, according to my husband, which he is one, Fred Hentz, all of these people are existentialists. They believe in doing whatever it takes. It doesn't matter what the law says. They will do anything necessary to get what they want politically, and economically, and whatever. In other words, killing a leader, killing 5 people, killing 20 people, according to George, is a lot better than war. This is the way they rationalize it. You didn't used to kill women and children in war when the British Army, when they were pure kind of, you didn't go out and kill. I think Dresden, they did do some of that, but that was Walt Whitman Rostow and his crowd. And he's a very dangerous man, because Walt Whitman Rostow is a communist.
Okay, and in what capacity is he?
Oh, he was one of the wise men in Kennedy's administration. I think he was probably responsible for the movement that got Kennedy murdered. I believe it was an Israeli group which did it with some of these rogues.
Okay, now when you mentioned wise men, is this an insider term?
Wise men, yeah. Kennedy's wise men were guys like, the Harvard crowd. And he was trying to bring them in to change things around a lot. Walt Whitman Rostow was the one who got us into the Vietnam War because he wanted to sell the weapons and stuff. He and Victor Krulak, who is the present commandant's father, Krulak was his lackey. Walt Whitman Rostow's lackey. Walt Whitman Rostow went with Taylor, General Taylor, and wrote the report that got us into the Vietnam War. And all the time that the Pentagon was saying, no, 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 he was a cheerleader for the weapons sales. He and Henry Kissinger, Heinz. He and Henry. Walt Whitman Rostow, Eugene Debs Rostow, these were communists, named for communists. Eugene Debs Rostow, and it's either his son or his other brother, runs the big Boston mob, the port there. His name is Nicholas Rostow, with the Weld, with William Weld. They've done all that drug business in Mexico for years. They had that Russian, the one who was murdered by the assassin, Ramon. He was a competitor, Stalin's competitor, and he escaped. Very famous. Tolstoy.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Tolstoy became a Christian at the end, and you can't become a Christian. That's a death warrant. So they killed Tolstoy because he was becoming too, I think, now I don't know the whole story. There's probably a lot more to it, and maybe I see completely the wrong picture there. But Tolstoy was murdered by this same Parisian, Spanish, Czechoslovakian, Georgian, Russian group,
Okay.
which are all part of the former Abwehr.
All right.
We've got to stop. Tolstoy is not the correct name. I know who you're talking about, but I can't think of it. Tolstoy is a writer.
A what?
He's a writer. He's a Russian writer. But the guy you're thinking of was murdered in Mexico.
Yeah.
It's not Tolstoy.
Okay. What was his name?
Nice little Jewish boy.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good point to bring this up because if we can correct that name, and don't go that wide. When I'm talking about going wide, I'm not talking about going anywhere near that wide because we got all this junk over here we don't want in the picture.
Are you sure it
That
wasn't
is
Tolstoy? I think
plenty
it
for-
was.
He's a writer.
That's just plenty for.
I know he's a writer.
Sorry about that.
This
It's
I
okay.
know.
This
It's
guy
okay.
was
You're learning.
the right-hand man of Lenin, and he defected and went to Mexico.
Right.
He went to Mexico and murdered him.
I think it was Tolstoy.
It could be two Tolstoys.
No,
Tolstoys.
Tolstoy is a very famous author.
You're not thinking of Trotsky.
Oh, yes, you're right. A. Oh, got it. Let's correct that. Oh, thank you. Bravo.
We're getting close.
Bravo.
You were doing
Close.
so well, and I thought we can't use this because it's the wrong name, and it's going to discredit
Good,
the whole story.
good.
And I'm
You're
sorry
good,
Okay.
about that.
Good.
All right.
Trotsky.
Well, let's back up. Okay. We have 5 minutes to go. Okay. We can easily do that. That is on this tape.
I'll tell you what,
We have more time than this, but on this tape.
Next tape, and in the next 5 minutes, tell us what Max Sug means, because you mentioned it earlier,
Okay.
but I still don't know what it means.
But let's get Trotsky in this piece right now while we're thinking about this. Okay. So let's pick this up with. You were saying about. We were talking about the wise men. We were talking about the Rostos and
William Weld in Mexico and the involvement of the Mexican government. And it's not Tolstoy, it's Trotsky.
Okay, hold on a second. Won't even necessarily mention that because that will be completely clipped and edited. So just go ahead and tell the whole story, but use the name Trotsky.
All right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
Here
we go.
This group, which was run out of Paris, is still being run out of Paris, this revolutionary terrorist group, which is controlling these Marines and Army Steiner's group. They all operate together. The man who started all of this program during Vietnam used communists who were in the Spanish communist movement. They actually promoted communists in the OSS, which was started by this William, Donovan.
Okay.
So they were promoting and using communists who were actually wanting to get rid of our form of government as a stepping stone to world domination. So this group now in the Army and in the Marine Corps has communists at the very top who are really, existentialist, which means they don't believe in God, they don't believe in Christ, they live for the moment, they believe in sort of one world which has no religions in it.
Right.
They're the ones who put Napoleon in power, they're the ones who put Oliver Cromwell in power. They're the ones probably who actually were behind the Roman Empire and maybe the Egyptian Empire. They put puppet people in power, and they actually run it from behind the scenes. Now, Trotsky, as I understand it, was escaped from Russia. He had become a Christian, I understand, and was working with agents in the United States, Israel. And he was considered a threat. So he had to be silenced, killed. There's an excellent book which I have called The Mind of an Assassin, which is about the background of Trotsky's assassin, a young man named Ramon, who was trained, he was Soviet paid, I think he had experience in Spain. They organized it in Paris, I believe. And of course, up to the present time, there have been assassins operating out of Rome, Milan in particular, Naples, and Paris. And these are all anarchists, all mob related. They use mob funding. And of course, drug money to pay for the weapons, which are brand new weapons. The Bosnia Bazaar, this is the reason we had the war in Bosnia. The war in Bosnia is simply a stage to train assassins, to be a market for brand new weapons, to be a marketplace so that the drug money can be used. And the Army runs the whole show. It's totally run by the Army. The CIA is a bogus thing. You know, it's Training and Doctrine Command. It's NATO. It's SHAPE. Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, started by Eisenhower. It's a totally independent corporation. Its main function is to sell weapons and launder money.
You're talking about CIA?
No,
No,
I'm talking
no.
about SHAPE.
SHAPE. Okay.
CIA is kind of bogus. I mean,
That's
it's
just
there.
a trade name for the media
Oh, it's to
to
confuse
use.
us. It's just to get us off the track. It's all being done by Army people who are now joint, because the word joint comes from the group that brought over a lot, and a lot of good people came over, but they came over illegally to kind of escape Nazi Germany and stuff. I don't know that much about it, but I do know that the funding organization, one of the funding organizations was out of New York, and it was called the Joint. And Meyer Lansky, see, our mob, the organized crime, the Jewish Kabbalist group, who don't believe in God really, well, they do. They look at God as a Kabbalah kind of thing, and the opposite of good is bad, and they have to get rid of all the good people and kill them, and then you know, I mean, they really do this. They're killing people who are good on purpose, and they get brownie points with their little cult. But this funding group in New York, they would pay for passports which were illegal, and they. In fact, my grandfather was involved with that. That's how I know so much about it, because my grandfather was told to keep silent and not to tell anybody, but of course he told my grandmother, and my grandmother told me, and I've told my children. Everybody knows they brought in probably more than 200,000 Nazi soldiers and SS and, you know, wacko scientists and psychologists, and all of them, most of them, had the German disease, you know, because it was their culture.
The German disease?
Yeah, the German disease is what the Pink Triangle boys were. Colonel Ron Ray writes about this. He's a Marine colonel who's a Christian who's writing about the Cherry Marines, the homosexuality in the group sex orgies and so forth. which brought down the German government, because Naples, which is where all of the Navy is doing their playing, I mean, today in Naples, these orgies are going on. It was where Krupp, the weapons manufacturer, used to take the German high command, and they would go into the Isle, on the Isle of Capri, into the Blue Grotto. And they would have big orchestras, and they'd bring in little boys, little Italian boys, who would be raped. They'd give them trinkets. And, of course, the mothers gradually found out, and just like me, it was one thing when there was just one of me. Now there are a lot more of us wives who are talking and telling truth. And it took those Italian women went to newspapers in Italy. They wouldn't listen. But when they went to the wives of these guys in Germany, it brought it all out. It brought the German government down because they were duplicitous in it, you know. But what they were doing was pedophilia. They were raping, bringing in little boys. They involved the Catholic priests, you know, who were bringing in all. Anyway, so, but what happened was this whole group came over to the United States. And they, it's an old culture, but it is the reason there are a lot of things going on with children these days.
Mm-hmm.
And it explains why it's all being covered up, because if you've got police officers who are playing these games and they're going in the woods like to, what is this place where, I mean, even Eisenhower played these games. Even Mike Kemp out in, it's called the Hermitage.
The Hermitage.
In California, where they all run, they get drunk and they run around nude in the woods and stuff.
Bohemian Grove kind of
That's
thing.
it, Bohemian Grove.
Okay.
Bohemian.
Rather than Hermitage, it's the Bohemian Grove.
Bohemian Grove, that's the name of it.
Uh-huh.
My brain's tired.
That's okay.
And the one in, there was a big one in Washington called Rush River Lodge, where they used to all go, and there are lots of places now. But the problem, as I see it, is that I think they're trying to destroy America and the basic Protestant Christian culture, because where you have a militaristic society, which is where the rules are only for those people, and keep in mind that Meyer Lansky and Luciano, Lucky Luciano, and the other man, they chose to go to Italy. Luciano went to Milan. He wasn't banished to Naples and Milan. The two top mob families went there because of the weapons industry. They're selling weapons. I mean, that's what the military is doing. It's totally controlled by the mob. Look at this. Weinberger was General Douglas MacArthur's. He spied on MacArthur in Korea. Who was MacArthur's nemesis? Albatross. It was none other than little old intelligence. I'm going to tell every move you make. Weinberger. Young, but he did it. He brought down MacArthur. Every move MacArthur was going to make, he broadcast it through the chaplain, his little intelligence network. And he got brownie points with the group because he brought down the big lion. When you get rid of a big lion like that, you get a big job. You've done good work. And they needed to get rid of MacArthur because he didn't want to keep the wars going. He wanted it over, and you know, it's like General Trefay, who took over after the Vietnam War was over, and he was on C-SPAN in August of '96 with former Ambassador Whitehead and a few of the other the State Department Vietnam people. And General Trefay, he was he had been holding this in for years. He was on C-SPAN. This man let it all out. He said, I took over at the end of the Vietnam War. I was in control, right? Big general charge. So I say, cut off the shipment of weapons. So I tell the Pentagon, cut off the shipment of weapons. He said, I got a phone call from Henry Kissinger saying the weapons are going to continue at the wartime rate.
Sure.
Now, that's when all this stuff with China started. It started before then, because already the communist agents, the New York, Brooklyn, New Jersey mob, were already training Mao. Mao was trained in Paris. So was, you know, the one in Cambodia. What's his name? I can't think of his name. The one who was Pol Pot.
Yeah.
They were homosexually, bless their little hearts, by priests. They were wonderful little boys sent there, you know, turned, which is the word, you know, when they believe their mothers, and then all of a sudden the world's horrible, and then they have these wonderful friends who are going to make them leaders.
Yeah.
They're turned psychologically, and it's a pattern. And so this is why it's so important to know what they are doing to innocent little boys in the Army and the Marine Corps today. Why? Why are they having them go together in groups and strip nude when they're brand new inductees?
Uh-huh.
Why do they do certain things in public, in front of the group? And
Well, they
why?
even do that during the pre-induction physical?
Yes.
I mean,
And they also have the doctor.
that's why I didn't want to go in the Army. I knew there was something.
Yeah. But they also turn around the other way after doing that. The other way, and they're upside down. And they do this anally. Now, why do they do that in public? Why are the urinals all out in public, you know, without separate stalls?
Yeah.
If they're not promoting this. And then why is it that the ones who are this way rise up faster than the ones who don't?
Because there's someone there noticing
Yeah, sure.
those
Sure.
who are
Vulnerable.
vulnerable. I was going to say rising, but that wouldn't be quite
They're
appropriate.
called rising stars.
Rising stars.
Rising, that's the word the State Department uses for those who are controlled. And when I was volunteering with the State Department as an escort in Virginia, I had this group called, I thought it up myself, VIVA, Virginia International Visitors Association. And I tried so hard to get to be a part of the State Department family. But you know, I'm a Christian, see, I'm a Protestant Christian, and they don't want Christians in there. My goodness. You know, I would have guests, and I would let them know I was a Christian and that I love them, and Virginia's a wonderful place. And
Yeah.
But I couldn't be a part of that.
No.
They sent me people, but I never was a part of it, even though I had lots and lots of dignitaries.
Did you
Are we
ever
running
have
out?
did you ever have any contact with Madeline Albright?
No, I lived with Sarah McClendon for about 6 months. And Sarah is a Democrat. See, I was a Republican all these years. I was married for 21 years to a Democratic governor's grandson. It was an arranged marriage, and so I knew a lot of the high-level Democrats who were really sort of conservative. It's hard, you know, in Virginia, they're very conservative. So when I stayed with Sarah McClendon, I had become a Republican, you know. And Sarah told me a lot of the things that were going on in the White House from her insider perspective. which totally challenged my perspective on everything. You know, Ron Brown was murdered, for example.
Sure.
Vince Foster was murdered. Forstall was murdered.
Tell you what, we're gonna break right here.
Okay.
Because we're just about out of tape, I think, on this in here. This would be a good place to pick up, though. Ron Brown, Vince Foster. I think Foster had a Marine Corps background. Is that possible?
I think so. He may have. I bet he did. That would fit right in.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. That would fit right in. Because Nussbaum's office was right across the hall.
Okay, we can pop these tapes out, actually.
Okay.
And we're fresh with brand new tapes, the number 2 ones. Let's take a nice little break.
All right.